Yo, quick plug for you guys before getting into the video. This weekend, I'll be co-streaming all of the EU and NA group stage matches on my Twitch and hopefully YouTube as well. Definitely follow me on Twitch though, at the minimum, at twitch.tv/ATP_OW, because there's going to be a really exciting event that goes down on there. On the 17th, I'm going to be the featured co-streamer of the day on the OWCS broadcast. It's literally a dream come true for me. They're going to be raiding with all of their viewers on my channel when the games are done for the night. It's going to be sick. It's a historic moment for my channel, and there's going to be memes. I'll be providing all of my reactions. We'll be watching back the Korea games from the night before as well, and there's going to be giveaways. So if all that sounds good, and you want to be a part of a very historic moment for this channel, definitely check out my Twitch. Hopefully I see you guys there. Welcome to the barren wasteland known as NA Overwatch. Who's ready for some of the most thrilling gameplay in all of Overwatch Champions series? I know I am. Unfortunately, we all know this is just Toronto's region. They clear everybody. It's the easiest $30,000 imaginable. And we're at a point where the most exciting part about NA is finding out who's number 2. But if we want that answer, first we've got to get through the group stage portion, which is the exact same format to what I described in the EU video a couple of days ago, so check that out if you haven't already. Link will be in the description. However, unlike EU, it kind of feels like the teams outside of number 1 have a bit more to play for. As right now, the standings would indicate that it's anyone's game in terms of who's going to be joining Toronto in Stockholm, Sweden for that first ever OWCS championship. Here's your current outlook at the standings. Friendly reminder that the top 3 are the ones that are going to Stockholm, Sweden. The standings as they are right now don't really do it justice in terms of just how crazy it's about to get, as multiple teams on this list either have gone inactive, no longer have a roster, or in general are brand new that are probably going to dominate in this stage and in the next one. Which is why, again, I say that top 3 has never been more wide open, and the outcome of this stage is going to play a huge role in giving us the answers we need in terms of who really deserves to be in the top 3 of NA. Here's a look at the 16 rosters that either made it through the Swiss or automatically qualified thanks to their Stage 2 performance. So the top 3, Toronto, NRG, Shock, and Citrus Nightmare, are all auto-qualifiers because of Stage 2. Makes sense, they've been dominating, and it would have been sleeper to have them be in the Swiss regardless. If you're wondering why there's only 3 auto-qualifiers as opposed to the 4 we saw in EU, that's because M80 decided to disband and they are not fielding a roster for this stage, so they lost that spot. Many of their players have already found new teams, which we'll talk about very soon, and Gator is retiring from Overwatch altogether for the time being, so wish him the best of luck in whatever comes next. Some of you may also see a lack of luminosity in this group, and just like with M80, they don't have a roster to field. They're not participating in this stage. A couple of their players are no longer on the team and have moved on to other opportunities, which again, we'll talk about in a little bit, but I thought it'd be worth bringing them up as it is Dante's team after all, and they were one of the more popular NA teams. Let's take a deeper dive into some of the more interesting rosters that are worth noting about in this stage and the individual groups. First is Group A, which is the Toronto stage. Who's going to be joining them? I'm not too sure. Toronto are still the same exact roster as we've seen throughout the entire year so far, fresh off of a 2nd place finish in the Esports World Cup as well. They've got to be feeling pretty good. They're leveling up by the day. They'll be falling asleep at the wheel for this entire tournament though, so there's not much else to say. They'll meme, they'll off-roll, just as they've always done. The rest of the group consists of a lot of NA players that you may have seen around, but I'm going to be putting a lot of emphasis on Green Fortnite as the clear-cut favorites to get out alongside Toronto. For those who don't know, they are the most recent winner of the Calling All Heroes major that happened, and it's basically the same team that they had during that event. It's a little bit different with no Anyun being there. Their DPS only has 2 players as well. But generally, they're riding a high right now. It's still the same core. It's a good team that probably is more than good enough to make it to the next section of this tournament and maybe even win a game in like the lower bracket or something. So yeah, this is a team that all Calling All Heroes fans can rejoice and watch together. They should do fairly well, at least this early on in the tournament. I'd argue their biggest competition to get through is probably Avidity. I don't know all that much about their players, to be honest with you, but they did finish literally right above Green Fortnite in the Swiss stage standings, so maybe they could provide some kind of challenge for them, although I'm more so leaning towards this being a pretty one-sided group. Speaking of one-sided groups, that's exactly where we're headed for Group B. We got two powerhouses in NRG Shock and TSM. TSM, I know, are more so on the weak side, and they haven't been nearly as good compared to what we saw in Stage 1. A bit of a fall-off from them, but at this point, I think they'll be okay. It doesn't seem like there's any real threat to them, and again, I think their roster still does have a lot of promise, regardless of the lackluster results in recent months. TSM fans still have that awesome DPS duo of Chopper and Rocket to watch, Icy still holding down the fort at tank as well, and thanks to the lackluster results, plus some other issues I suppose, they're making a roster overhaul happen. They're saying goodbye to CJ, and Sunjun, Riker, and Magic Maypall's going inactive for the time being, and in return, they're bringing in Lep, King, and Renko to fill out the rest of the roster. Desperate times call for desperate measures. This team has felt stuck, they've struggled after a strong start out of the gates, they've slowed down significantly, and this is their answer. Now, whether or not these new pieces will be the right fit is a completely different question. The King signing is one that a lot of people will definitely appreciate. He could fill in the void by Sunjun for sure, and he should be a great complementary piece to the already strong DPS line this team has. Now, the backline is a different story, and that's going to be the main thing that decides if this team can be very successful or not in this tournament. Now, maybe because they're in a better situation here on TSM, things could be better, but I have my doubts. There's definitely something to prove with this backline, and again, if they can't perform, then TSM's still going to be stuck anyway. It's going to be very interesting to see how they play, and they'll have a great test early on against the likes of NRG Shock. After being that small, lovable team that everybody cheered for, they have expanded greatly. Unfortunately, through all this expansion, they did end up having Infected leave the team. He's officially moving on to Nightmare, who we'll talk about in just a little bit, but in return, they're replacing him with a Kellen and Attack Korean import tank line. And they're adding Ultraviolet and Tree into the mix as well, as they pick those guys up from M80. NRG have retooled, and they're ready to make a push. On paper, this team looks awesome, and just the fact that they still have a lot of the same pieces makes it even better. However, with big changes also means having to adjust. Early on in the groups, it won't be a problem, but I'm very curious to see how this team holds up as the competition starts to get tighter in this tournament. Talented players or not, there's an adjustment period that comes with bringing on all of these amazing players. I mean, Kellen and Attack, they are import players who have been trying to find a home for a long time. We know they have great ceilings, and they complement each other's games well, and from purely an Overwatch perspective, they give you what you want, but they're no Infected. That's what they're going to have to try and replace. They have to fill the void left behind by a staple member of this team, arguably the second best tank in NA outside of someone through the previous tournaments we've seen. Great consistency, a good commer, a good leader, all of that's going away, and now you're depending on Kellen and Attack, who are more so not as used to these types of environments. That's a big adjustment and a gamble, and if it does pay off, they're definitely going to reap the benefits, but if not, I wonder what's going to happen moving forward with their tank situation, and if it's something that could come back to haunt them. However, I'm feeling maybe a bit more comfortable with the Tree and Ultraviolet situations. These guys feel like great fits on this team, more NA talent added to the mix, some of the best out there. Tree's someone who I kind of was hoping would be on this team once he came of age for a while. No offense to PGE, but I think it's just great to have another option on the table in case. PGE, Tree, and Scissors should be a more consistent trio than what they had previously, and Ultraviolet, whether he's the starter or maybe comes in for the rotation, is going to give them that extra flexibility so they feel more comfortable in those double flex support setups, or maybe he just becomes the starter outright altogether next to Rack Attack. Either way, I think that the DPS and backline definitely got better, and I think this NRG team is in a great spot, and it seems like they're definitely going to be fighting for that number 2 spot. They will be in the thick of it for sure. Unfortunately, there's not much else to really look forward to in Group B. This is just an overly stacked group. Over in Group C is where there's maybe potential for more of a fight for one of the top 2 spots going on. Obviously, it's going to be led by Citrus Nightmare, though. We haven't been able to talk about this team that much as of late just because of the long break, but they have been one of the most exciting teams in all of NA and easily the best story in my opinion. However, even though they still are a good team and they have a lot of needed experience and confidence to do well, they're going to be carrying on without the guy who made them a lot more relevant in that Stage 2. Lethal is off the team. And anyone who watched Citrus in Stage 2 knows that he was playing out of his mind. Lethal was doing some scary things on Sojourn. And without that hyper carry, I just don't know if they'll be the same team. There is a lot of pressure being added to that DPS line. Tap still should be pretty good, but is it going to be enough? I'm not too sure. Still a really fun team regardless, and they probably get through the groups without a shadow of a doubt. But man, I don't know if they're going to be the same team once we get past that point. Unfortunately, we just can't get a lot of useful information out of the group with Citrus, as their biggest opposition is probably Shikigami, who, don't get me wrong, deserve a pat on the back for making it here for the 3rd consecutive stage. They've shown good consistency, they've got the same core while making some improvements here and there, but they're just still so unproven. They haven't taken that next step. And against a team like Citrus that is already far beyond them in that regard, I don't really have a lot of hope for them to do that. But at bare minimum, at least they're going to be right in there for that number 2 spot. They have a great opportunity to make it happen here if they can get past Fluffy Dreamland. This team has mostly already played together. We saw a lot of them go in Stage 1. They've got some solid contributors on this team. All of them had some good feats, have shown good capabilities. I'm a fan of that Haven Chime DPS line in particular, and I think they could make some serious noise against Shikigami potentially, although they definitely have their work cut out for them as they played those guys in the Swiss and they got 2-0'd pretty convincingly. Oh, and shout out to the other team in this group. They don't really serve any relevance, but with a name like Hoktomi Nice, I feel like you just have to bring them up, right? How in God's name do you even get away with making a team with this name? I wonder if they're going to make them change it or not. Regardless, I feel like I just had to bring them up because of how ridiculous this meme is getting, and some people may want to cheer for them for that fact alone. On a more serious note, there's Group D, which is headlined by the new biggest threat in NA, Nightmare. After making some serious upsets happen to make it to the Esports World Cup, this team is ready for action, and they're looking scarier than ever before. Remember when I said NRG no longer have Infected? Well, this is the team he landed with. Initially here on loan, it seems like it's now a permanent deal for him, and that is massive considering, again, he's one of the best possible tank options on the NA market, and he's not even the only nasty tank player they have, as they also went ahead and got Clear, who some people may not be as familiar with because even though he's NA, he played on Bleed Esports in Pacific, and he was also a big-time carry. Now him and Infected are going to be together, and they are undoubtedly going to be the most deadly tank tandem from NA. But then you add in CJ, and you pick up Lethal as well from Citrus Nation, and you have one hell of a team going on here. From top to bottom, you have playmakers just about everywhere. This team is beyond stacked for NA standards, and they just might be the clear favorites to be the new number 2 in North America. And thankfully, we have a chance to see them stand on business early on in Group D when they play against Timeless, who just so happens to be the 2nd place finisher in the NA Swiss. Vision, Luke Mino, and Squid all come from Luminosity. They brought in Kuffa as well. It's just a nice, well-rounded team here that Timeless is working with, and probably one of those teams that people are not going to think about as much knowing the powerhouses, but you're going to be reminded of very quickly when they potentially do extremely well in this tournament. This is looking like a serious 2-team race in Group D. Mighty unfortunate for the rest of the participants, although I am at least somewhat intrigued to watch Fries in the bag. Really great name, first and foremost, but second of all, they've got Annie Yoon on this team, as well as Nas and Crowie, who we haven't seen that much of since the Valiant days. It's always great to see some familiar faces, and while their fate may or may not be sealed, we wish them the best of luck. And that summarizes my thoughts on some of the more noteworthy teams from the NA Stage 3 groups. Unfortunately, not as stacked compared to EU, not as many deep groups compared to them, but that's just how it goes in an inferior region like this. And unfortunately for me, that means there's just no way I could have some bold predictions for these groups. Group A we know is going to be Toronto, and I'm going to throw Green Fortnite in there as well, as I have some good confidence in them. For Group B, obviously NRG and TSM, there's just no other way to think about it. Group C, I'm going with Citrus and Shikigami for sure, although Fluffy Dreamland may have an opportunity to sneak into that top 2. And then in Group D, it's gotta be Nightmare and Timeless. These guys powerhouse their way through the Swiss stage, and nobody else in that group really stands a chance. The race towards Sweden and getting smoked by Toronto is on. Let's see who steps up during this glorious occasion. Let me know what you think of the NA groups down in the comments below, and who you think is going to be the number 2 team this stage. And if you enjoyed the video and you want more content just like this, give the video a like and subscribe to the channel if you're new. I appreciate all of you so much, and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.